Coming up on Hoosier Sports Night, Indiana football secures their first 5-0 record in 57 years. We'll tell you all about the Hoosiers' second Big Ten win.
And men's soccer scores late to get a big road win at 8th-ranked Wisconsin. This is Hoosier Sports Night.
Hello and welcome to Hoosier Sports Night. I'm Mike Badrov.
And I'm Grace Lesher. So Mike, did you get a text from Coach Signetti over the weekend?
Yeah, I did. And then I ended up at a really rainy and amazing football game.
Me too. Stayed all 4 quarters.
Yeah, and speaking of Kurt Signetti, head coach Kurt Signetti and his Indiana Hoosiers continued their undefeated start to the season, improving to a 5-0 by defeating Maryland 42-28. Our Thomas Crow has more.
A historic 42-28 victory for the Hoosiers on a rainy day at Memorial Stadium.
So we're 5-0 and 57 years. I'm older than that, by the way. But this isn't the end, for us.
The Hoosiers struck pay dirt first with Miles Price from 1 yard out, but on the ensuing Maryland possession, Caden Prather scored from 33 yards out. Curtis Rourke then found Omar Cooper for a 27-yard score with less than a minute to go in the first half.
Yeah, huge. I think it was something that we wish would have happened sooner, but it was definitely really important to have some momentum going into the second half.
That touchdown to Cooper would be one of Rourke's 3 on the day to go along with 359 yards. His other 2 scores went to Elijah Surratt and Donovan McCauley, scoring his first touchdown of the season. Rourke, however, turned the ball over 3 times, the first 3 turnovers of the Hoosiers season. Maryland fought back in the second half to even the score at 21-all with a Roman Hemby 75-yard touchdown. On the defensive side, the Hoosiers got to Maryland's QB Billy Edwards Jr. 5 times, 2 of which coming from James Carpenter and another coming from McCall Kamara, who discussed the Maryland rivalry post-game.
It meant a lot. For me personally, just like Maryland being close to home and them not recruiting me, this was definitely personal.
Another historic day here in Memorial Stadium. The Indiana Hoosiers advance to 5-0. They will now go to Evanston, Illinois, where they will take on the Northwestern Wildcats next Saturday starting at 3:30. Myself and the rest of the IUSTV sports team will have you covered. For now, I'm Thomas Crow in Memorial Stadium for IUSTV Sports.
The Hoosiers will look to continue their undefeated streak at Northwestern this weekend. Keep up with our Joe Cronin and Thomas Crow as they make the trip to Wildcat Country.
October is here, so it's no surprise that Indiana men's soccer picked up a big road win in Wisconsin on Tuesday. In a back-and-forth game, the Hoosiers defeated the Badgers 3-2. Sophomore Collins Aduro opened the scoring with a goal within the first 12 minutes, but Wisconsin quickly tied it just 10 minutes later. Senior Tommy Mahalik scored his 6th goal of the season to give the Hoosiers the lead again in the second half. But Wisconsin would not go down without a fight, tying it once again in the 62nd minute. Just 2 minutes later, Collins Aduro secured the win with his 2nd goal of the night. Indiana is now 2-1-1 in the Big Ten and will host Washington this Friday.
Indiana women's soccer went on their first ever West Coast Conference road trip last week to Oregon and Washington. Coming off a scoreless 3-game losing streak, the Hoosiers saw Oregon first. An early Avery Sneed header and a tap-in from El Britt would end that drought and give Indiana a 2-0 lead. IU's freshman phenom forward, Lila Serta, buried one in the 70th minute to seal the deal and give IU their first conference win. The Washington Huskies would prove to be a tougher opponent. Indiana was outshot 11-3 and picked up 4 yellows. Hope Paredes was sent off with a red card in the 61st minute. The women could not overcome the adversity of foul trouble and gave up a game-winning goal to junior midfielder Kelsey Branson. The Hoosiers conceded their West Coast trip 1-1 with a 1-4 record in conference play. Indiana will travel to Iowa City for a Thursday match against the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Coming up after the break, we crown this week's Hoosier Highlight Athlete of the Week.
And Indiana comes back from the West Coast winless. We'll give you more from their road trip. Don't go anywhere. Hey, welcome back to Hoosier Sports Night.
Joining us in studio for this week's Hoosier Highlight is IUSTV sports reporter Preston Andrews. Preston?
Thanks, Grace. About a week ago, Elijah Surratt talked about having the nickname Waffle House because I am always open, he said. This week, Surratt did more than tell us about his favorite breakfast spot. Facing the Hoosier aerial attack, Surratt collected 128 yards on 7 catches as a key offensive cog in the Cream and Crimson's record-breaking 42-28 win over Maryland. Surratt's lone touchdown of the afternoon would be the first of 3 straight Hoosier touchdowns in the second half, effectively putting the Terrapins away for good. Surratt's big afternoon moves him into 4th in the Big Ten in receiving yards, as him and the rest of the Hoosiers look to remain undefeated in the conference on Saturday. That's all for me. Back to you guys at the desk, and maybe you guys can get a waffle while you're up there.
Indiana's volleyball squad faced off in the Big Ten opener against the Washington Huskies and Oregon Ducks this weekend. The Hoosiers lost in straight sets against Washington due to errors in defensive play. Sophomore middle blocker Ava Vickers carried Indiana offensively with 10 kills for a career best, but the Huskies ultimately outperformed the Hoosiers in all 3 sets. Following the sweep by Washington, Indiana gave their all against Oregon, but just fell short in a 4-set match. Oregon secured the win in the first 2 sets, but the Hoosiers kept fighting and won set 3 with an impressive comeback. Indiana could not keep the same energy in set 4, starting off down 13-20. Aird's squad began to close in on the Ducks, but Oregon clinched a 25-21 set to take home the win.
You know, there's losses, but then there's losses, right? So you lose to Oregon, they're a top 10 team on the road in 4, and it's a nail-biter. You're never happy when you lose, but it's growth. And I think that's the thing I'm most proud of every single year. I think the team that I have every year could have maybe beaten the team the year before.
Indiana returns home to welcome Michigan State here in Wilkinson Hall on Friday, followed by the Ohio State Buckeyes on Sunday.
Over the weekend, Indiana University's Laura Schneider played in the ITA All-American Tournament, taking place at the iconic Cary Tennis Park in North Carolina. Schneider began her weekend by playing in the pre-qualifying round of 128. This opening match was bound to be difficult, as she was set to play against the 12th-seeded player of the tournament. Shortly after the match began, Laura dropped the first set 1-6, but was able to come back and win her second set 6-1, sending the match into a third overtime set. Yet she could not pull off the win and fell 4-6. Despite the loss, Schneider decided to continue her participation into Sunday's consolation match. Unfortunately, Laura had to withdraw from the match due to injury. Despite the tough weekend, Laura, along with her teammates, are eager to host the annual Hoosier Classic from October 4th to the 6th at the IU Tennis Center.
Indiana field hockey went 1-1 over the weekend, but fell short against another Big Ten opponent. Indiana field hockey started off the weekend by facing number 19 ranked Penn State, losing 3-2 in a close battle that came down to a missed penalty corner by the Hoosiers with 8 seconds left. On Sunday, the Hoosiers dominated Lock Haven, winning 3-0, led by senior Yip Van Wanderen, who scored all 3 goals. The Hoosiers are now 3-5 after the weekend and will come back home to Deborah Tobias Field in Bloomington to face Maryland this Friday.
And now joining us in the studio for this week's Candy Stripe calendar is IUSTV sports reporter Grace Jeffer. Take it away, Grace.
Thanks, guys. Buckle up because the Hoosiers have a very busy weekend. On Friday, field hockey hosts the Maryland Terrapins at Deborah Tobias Field at 1. Later that night at Wilkinson Hall, the Spartans travel from East Lansing to face volleyball at 7. Also at 7, men's soccer plays at home at Bill Armstrong Stadium to take on the Washington Huskies, their first time competing as Big Ten opponents. To start off Saturday, football has the chance to improve on their newly minted number 23 ranking, the highest in-season pre-COVID rank in 31 years. They play the Northwestern Wildcats on the road at 3:30. On Sunday, women's volleyball takes on the Buckeyes at Wilkinson Hall at 1. To finish up the weekend, women's soccer travels west to face Iowa as they attempt to hand the Hawkeyes their first loss. That's a wrap for this week's Candy Stripe calendar. Back to you at the desk.
And that's our show for the week. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at IUSTV Sports to keep up with all the latest in IU athletics. For our production crew behind us, I'm Grace Lesher.
And I'm Mike Badrov. We'll see you next week.